Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Halloween will close out another month in a few days, but I've got plenty of frightful, horrifying sports takes today, depending on who you root for over the course of the next hour or so, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe's JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now, as we get set for a Game 3, which will take place not too far from where I'm currently sitting, as the Yankees look to bounce back after two tough losses, one on Friday night, which was brutal, the other on Saturday night, which could have been, just a bit of a luck on their side, that maybe that they could have tied the game and maybe even won the game, considering the meltdown by Blake Trinan on the mound there Saturday night. But as I encapsulate these first couple of games and go detail by detail heading into tonight and what I think will still be a series. So I'm sure the Yankee fan out there is probably thinking, all right, well, we're going to have to win maybe 3 straight or at least the next 2. I think they're going to do that. And I'll explain that a little bit later on. But not a lot of Yankee fans are jumping ship yet. As we all know, a series isn't a series until the home team loses. And if the Yankees do happen to lose one of these next 2 games, chances are it could go bye-bye for the Bombers here in this series. And is there anyone to blame? Is there anyone to point the finger to? I'm sure a lot of people like myself or other radio hosts, the TV talking heads, etc., are probably thinking Aaron Boone blew Game 1. And then Game 2, we could look at the likes of maybe even Carlos Rodon, a guy that they brought here for $162 million, which is tied into the GM, Brian Cashman. We can get into all that. And even Aaron Judge, for that matter. Yes, we will dissect it all here. And let me go back to Game 1, because that was a classic game. That was a baseball game that was riveting, which was played very well. A game that had 2 pitchers that were dealing, and even with the one mistake that Jack Flaherty made by the 2-run homer, hanging that slider to Giancarlo Stanton. And it looked like the Yankees, not necessarily that they were going to cruise, but they were in good shape going into the latter innings, especially with their ace, Gerrit Cole. And then what happens in the bottom of the 7th, when Teoscar Hernandez led off with a base hit, who comes out of the dugout? None other than Aaron Boone. And check those receipts, people, because back on Thursday's podcast, I talked about how Aaron Boone, granted it may not be all his fault because of the aforementioned Brian Cashman and the powers that be that run the front office to try to map out the game before it's actually played. And for your guy, Gerrit Cole, who's getting paid $36 million a year, $324 million contract that he signed prior to the 2020 season, he's brought here to not only perform on a stage like this and pitch in big games like this, but to go as far and as deep as he possibly can. And he was dealing that night. And for him to get pulled after 88 pitches is an absolute travesty. And this goes on both sides too, because Dave Roberts did the same thing in Game 2, where he had Yoshinobu Yamamoto throw 86 pitches, and he gets pulled after getting an out, a fly out by Giancarlo Stanton there in the top of the 7th. So just like for Cole, he went 6+ innings, and for Yamamoto to go 6 1/3 to get pulled, and Yamamoto gave up 1 hit, a solo homer to Juan Soto, as we know. And why are they pulling these pitchers so early? What, 3rd time around the lineup? Oh, right away, a sign of trouble. We got to go out there and pull the hook. Makes no sense. I get it. This is baseball 2024, but it's a thing where it just irritates you as a baseball fan, as long as I've watched, followed, etc., to see these managers just right away push the panic button to say, I got to get my relievers in there, a fresh arm that's going to throw 100. Don't you know that as the series goes on, that these batters are going to come familiar with these pitchers, and as you get deeper into the series, next thing you know, it's going to be more of the advantage to the hitter. So the last thing you'd want to do as a manager, and people could say, well, who are you, JAYREELZ, to say? You're not part of these front offices, you're not the manager, etc. I'd watch baseball forever. How do you think all these pitchers that have gone complete games in 7th, 8th, 9th inning, let them blow the game first before you pull them out? But no, right away, Teoscar Hernandez leads off with a single, and he's the 4-hitter on that team. And granted that their hitters have been dangerous throughout the course of this postseason, the Tommy Edmonds, the Kike Hernandezes, but you know what? Let Gerrit Cole get out of it. He's up by a run. Why even think about pulling him there? So that is mistake number one on Aaron Boone's part. And then as you get deeper into the game, I know bottom of the eighth, the Dodgers tied. And then in the ninth inning, I know Judge had a shot there. He popped up to close out the top of the ninth. And then we get to the 10th inning. And even though the Yankees had scored a run. And in fact, just a little bit of a quick story, sidebar, if I may. Friday night, I went down to Billy's Sports Bar. I wanted to go down there. I wanted to join the likes of Keith McPherson, a guy who I had on the podcast a couple of months ago. You could go back in the archives and check that out. Shameless plug there. But I happened to stand online to go into Billy's Sports Bar, and right outside of Yankee Stadium, a stone's throw. And I was fortunate enough to be online with three young guys who love baseball, two big Yankee fans. And Ryan, I know he's not much of a Yankee fan, but Ryan, a Raven fan, I might add. I'm going to talk about his Ravens later on. Ryan, Alex, and Matt, and I don't know why my voice is acting up, but nevertheless, those three guys bought me a couple of beers. I really, truly appreciate their company that night, and of course, I gave them a couple of t-shirts along the way when it comes to the podcast, so I had to do them that solid, considering that they were doing me a solid. So for that, when you have those guys that were standing online and were waiting to get into the bar, we didn't get into the bottom of the 7th inning, and then I had to leave at the bottom of the ninth. I left because I figured I don't know how long this game's going to go on. I don't want to get home past midnight, whatever. So I listened in the car. So of course the Yankees get the go-ahead run, and then for the bottom of the 10th to come, where they took out Gleyber Torres, I believe maybe for a pinch runner. Off the top of my head, I may be fumbling that, but I know they put in Oswaldo Cabrera, who made a diving attempt on a play that was not completed, which extended the inning, and therefore for Boone to then bring in Nestor Cortez to face Shohei Ohtani, and Cortez has not pitched in 5 weeks, on top of a guy like Tim Hill, who's been coming out of the bullpen as a lefty to try to get a lefty like Shohei Ohtani out. And I guess part of the reasoning or the logic of not bringing in Hill to bring in Cortez is that he pitched well on the side. Aaron Boone, seriously, I'm a baseball fan, and I understand I am not a Yankee fan in the least, as everybody knows. But you mean to tell me you're going to try to sell me those bill of goods that Nestor Cortez was throwing the ball well when you have a guy in the bullpen? That I get it. You didn't want Tim Hill to, let's say, face Shohei Ohtani, and then the opportunity could possibly arise where he had to face Mookie Betts, and that would have been an advantage towards Betts. But still, he's a guy that has been reliable, a guy that has come out of that bullpen time and time again this postseason, and you're going to bank on a game one where you would love to get off to have a great start to your series, to get that game, and then play with house money in game two. But no, what does he do? He brings in Cortez. Then you see Ohtani, who at that point was out, so they walked Betts to get the bases loaded. And then the next pitch, Cortez only threw 2 pitches. One to Ohtani, and then the next one was a 93-mile-an-hour meatball served right down the middle, and it was taken outside of the ballpark over the right field fence. And Freddie Freeman, who's killed my team over the years, so now the Yankees and their fans get a taste of that. So Dodgers win 6-3 game 1, and then game 2 on Saturday night. Fireworks early with all the home runs with Tommy Edman, who looked like he was trying to pick up from where he left off in the championship series. And then Soto hits the home run to tie the game. And the next thing you know, you had a 2-run homer from Teoscar Hernandez with 2 outs, I might add. Mookie Betts gets a hit. Hernandez hits a home run. Freeman answers that with a back-to-back. And then in those middle innings, you got nothing. Quiet game. Yamamoto's mowing him down. He retired 11 straight Yankees before he was pulled, as I mentioned earlier. Stupid move. But be that as it may, and it was a 4-1 lead on top of that. Where Cole left, it was 2-1. All right. No excuse to pull him out anyway, but for whatever the reason, if that's what Boone wanted to do, fine. But Dave Roberts and the Dodgers had a 3-run lead. Why are you pulling Yamamoto at that point? But anyway. So now, as you get to the 9th inning, and Blake Trinan comes in, and Trinan is trying to be Houdini, and he's doing whatever possible to give the Yankees the game. So the Yankees scratch out a run there where Trinan is throwing wild pitches, Trinan is hitting batsmen, he's doing whatever it takes, like I said, to have the Yankees at least tie the game or maybe even take the lead there in the top of the 9th. And what happens? He gets pulled there for Alex Vesia because at that point, after he hits Rizzo, and even with the run in, and he loads the bases, Jazz Chisholm gets a hit, Rizzo gets hit on his in the ribs. And then for Trinan, he does get Volpe to strike out, but then you had a scenario where it was going to be lefty-lefty. So Vesia comes in and they pull the batter, who I believe was Austin Wells, for Jose Trevino. And I get it. He's a guy that's going to, if the Yankees tied the game, come in the bottom of the ninth for defense. But Trevino, I get it. He's had more at-bats than Jason Dominguez. And Dominguez has not seen an at-bat here in quite some time. And it'd be similar to what we saw with Cortez in Game 1, a guy who's been on the shelf for 5 weeks, nursing an injury and trying to get on the mend to come back, where you had a guy in Tim Hill, and Trevino's only got, 3 at-bats in his postseason? But with Dominguez, and I get it, that is a tough spot to put the young kid, but that's also a spot for him to flourish. That why not roll the dice there? Because it's not as if Jose Trevino, who batted .215 this year, and although had 1 hit and 3 at-bats, or 2 at-bats coming into that at-bat against Vesia, but you know what? You can make Dominguez and even make yourself look a lot better, Aaron Boone, if you give him a crack there. Maybe he gets a base hit, maybe he gets a flare, or even better yet, hits a grand slam to do what Freddie Freeman did the night before. And for Trevino, I get it. He's been around. He's not a great offensive hitter in the least, but you're trying to catch lightning in a bottle. Well, how I look at it is try to catch lightning in a bottle with a player who is going to be a future and has a lot of potential, and why not have him come up there to get a taste of what it's like in the postseason for him to deliver? So that's how I would have looked at it. But as it was, Trevino flies out to the track. At first, it looked like it was going to be dangerous for the Dodgers, but Tommy Edman makes the catch, and the Dodgers are up 2-0 in the series. And we could talk about Aaron Boone all we want. This is what it is. This is how he's going to be. And as I mentioned on Thursday and in podcasts prior, this man is going into an option. And you know they're going to sign him for another 3-year deal. That goes without saying. But this guy is going to be a manager. And I don't want to put this all on Aaron Boone. And I understand that the Dodgers scored in the bottom of the 8th inning to tie the game in Game 1. But seriously, go with Cole until no more. Again, that's why you brought him here, to win these type of games. But again, this is 2024 baseball, and it's all about the analytics. And as I like to say, and I got this from Todd Zeal, the former Met, it's all about the iPad and not the eye test. And the same for Roberts, pulling Yamamoto, giving up 1 hit in 6 1/3 innings. But again, I don't know anything about baseball, whatever, so be it. Now, as we get toward tonight, tomorrow, what can we unpack? What can we discuss? I know the first thing, Aaron Judge. Now, I will say this. There were a lot of people out there thinking that they were going to boo Aaron Judge during the introductions and maybe even in his first plate appearance. If you're going to do that, don't even show up. That's not a fan. That's just a 20 or 23-year-old who is just fed up and goes with the wind from 1 second to the next, because Judge, he could strike out in his first appearance tonight and they'll boom to the high heavens. And then in the 7th inning, when it's a 4-2 game and 2 runners on, he hits a 3-run homer, they're going to be cheering for him. So those fans, they could just, please, go out into the pasture. Don't even bother. Don't even show up. But Judge, you have to wonder, does he have a little bit of that A-Rod-itis prior to the 2009 playoffs, to where he's had these big regular seasons, he's had MVP regular seasons, similar to A-Rod in 04 and in 07, and all we've seen from Alex Rodriguez then, just like we're seeing from Aaron Boone now, a guy that for whatever reason is just flailing away at those sliders, is not able to make decent contact. He's 1 for 9 in the 2 games with 6 strikeouts, and he's going to hear from the home crowd if he's up in big spots, and he has been up in big spots here in the postseason where he has not delivered. Game 1 just set the table for him. 2nd and 3rd, nobody out against the Royals, and what did he do? He struck out. And pretty much from that point on, he has not delivered. Okay, yes, in Cleveland, the home run off a Classic, etc., and you give kudos to him, tip the cap. But this is a guy, as we all know, the back of his baseball card. 58 home runs, he's going to win an MVP, 2 MVPs in the last 3 years, and in the postseason, he's done squat. So a lot of pressure is going to be put on him tonight. Not that he has to carry the team or deliver the team, but he certainly is going to have to pull his weight if the Yankees have any shot at coming back in the series. And then when we look at the pitching matchups over the course of these next 2 games, I could talk about the 3rd game too, but right now with the Dodgers up 2-0, although I think there's going to be a 5th game. But here's why. Let's get right to it. Here's why I think that the Yankees will draw even, and there'll be a pivotal Game 5 come Wednesday night. Not only is this the pitching matchups, but I really think that these next two games are going to be high-scoring games. And for Clark Schmidt, who has pitched well, but he's going to have to do more than well. He's going to have to pitch almost lights out. Because the Dodger team, granted that they've only scored 10 runs in the 2 games, granted that 4 of those came on 1 swing in extra innings, but they've been able to hold the Dodgers at bay here. But with Clark Schmidt, and I know it's going to be a big game for him, the biggest game of his life, and he's going to have to keep his team, whatever it may be. He's probably going to get pulled early if he's going to start to unravel. But let's say if he gives the Yankees 5 innings with 2-run, 5-hit ball, they'll take it. Because I'm sure that Aaron Boone does not want to go to that bullpen, even with a day's rest yesterday. And even with the Dodger offense, who I'm sure going to be clicking. And the other big storyline that I hadn't talked about was Shohei Ohtani. Tried to steal second there in the 7th inning, that slide where he extended his shoulder. And it looked like there was a serious issue, whether it was his shoulder, his arm, etc. Turns out that he had a partial separation there where they're able to fix it. And he'll be in the lineup tonight. Now, it's his left shoulder, so it's not his front shoulder where his swing should not be compromised as much if it was his front shoulder. But you still have to wonder whether or not he's going to be able to swing a big bat here throughout the remainder of this series, or if he's just going to be a guy that's going to try to just get the hits where he can get them, whether that means he's going to have to spray the ball or not have to exhilarate the power, the immense power that he has, even with that short porch in right field. And for Ohtani, that's going to be a big focal point from here on out to see whether or not he's going to be able to produce the way he has throughout the course of the regular season and even so far up until this point in the playoffs. But I really think with Walker Buehler pitching tonight and Clark Schmidt, now Buehler, if you recall, Game 3 against the Mets, it was a cold night and he threw 90 pitches in 4 innings, but he was very effective with his curveball. He even said that the cooler weather, he has a better grip on the ball, and it's going to be chilly in the Bronx tonight. So if he could have a carbon copy of the game he had in Queens that he'll have in the Bronx, who knows how far that could take the Dodgers and possibly winning a Game 3 tonight. But I really think that the Yankee offense, not to say that they're going to wake up, but I think that they're going to have, with the home cooking, the fans behind them, I think they're going to have a big game tonight. But will Clark Schmidt also deliver? This is why I think tonight's going to be a high-scoring game. And even the same for Game 4. It's going to be a bullpen game for the Dodgers, and I'm sure they're going to want to try to get length out of Buehler. If they can get 6 innings out of Buehler tonight, they'll do cartwheels. But with a bullpen game tomorrow, and for the Yankees pitching Luis Hill, and Hill has an electric arm, but he's been hit or miss, up and down, especially in the second half of the year where he got up to that blazing start over the first 2 months of the season. So the Dodgers, you would think that they're going to try to feast off a Hill, and who knows, if it's 3-0, what kind of pressure will Hill have? If it's 2-1, he'll still have pressure because the Yankees are going to need to win that game. They can't go down 3-1. Not to say it's impossible for them not to come back from a 3-1 series deficit. We did see that in the 2016 World Series with the Cubs and then Indians, but still, it's going to be a tall order for the Bombers to do that. So I think these next 2 games are going to be high scoring. I think they're going to be in the Yankees' favor. Who knows if Judge will finally awaken from his playoff slumber, and with the red-hot Giancarlo as well as Soto, and maybe the bottom of the order will pick up the Anthony Volpes of the world, the Austin Wells. Who knows? Almost like the NBA, where you know your superstars will deliver, but who is the guy that's off the bench that's going to chip in the 4 3-pointers or the 17-point performance that's going to lead their team to victory? Yankees going to have to do that here tonight, especially with the Austin Wells, the Volpes, the Jazz Chisholms of the world that are going to have to step up here and deliver. And I think it's going to be a Game 5 where whomever's going to win that game will go up 3-2 back to LA for a Game 6 Friday. And the good thing is we'll talk all about it there on Thursday's podcast as the 3 games will transpire here over the next 3 nights. And who knows? Will it be a possibility that the next time I'll be in front of this mic on Thursday morning, could the baseball season and the World Series be over? I don't think that's going to be the case. I'd really be shocked. Now, I will say this. If the Dodgers win tonight, I think they'll win one of the next 2 games. I don't know if the Yankees winning tonight, the Dodgers will win the next 2. I think they'll win one of the next 2, but I don't think they'll win the next 2. And then the flip side of that is, could the Yankees win the next 3? I think they could. I don't think they will. That's why I think that Game 5 is enormous. And I don't care if you're Brian Cashman, Hal Steinbrenner, and of course the manager Aaron Boone. If it is a Game 5, especially if it's even at 2, and I understand even at 3-1 because now you're pitching for your season. But Garrett Cole has to go out there and give you 100 pitches. I mean, unless he's getting shelled in the first 3 innings and then you got to pull him. But if it's a scenario like Game 1 where he's dealing and it's the 7th inning and let's say the first runner gets on and the Yankees are up 4-2 and it's time to pull Garrett Cole, you are off of your rocker. The Yankees cannot do that. You got to go down. If the ship is sinking, you got to go down with your best. And if Cole, for whatever the reason, if it's 4-2 and he gives up a hit and then there's another bloop and then a blast and it's 5-4 and you pull him then, fine. But you got to go down with your best. That's like pinch hitting for Aaron Judge in the 8th inning. Because, I can't put Judge because the pitcher that Judge is facing has a lifetime record or a lifetime stat against Judge of 0 for 6 and 5 strikeouts. You're not going to pull Judge in that case, are you? Of course not. So that's why Cole has to give you that dominant Cy Young effort in that game number 5. And for him to go, if it's 120 pitches, so be it. That's going to be the last game he's going to pitch all year. And I don't want to hear, we're going to try to save him maybe for Game 7 to pitch 1 inning. You got to worry about what you got in front of you, not what's going to possibly lie ahead. So that's what we have there with the World Series, people. I'm looking forward to it. And not only that, but you also have had some big-time viewership here as the series has averaged 14.5 million over the first 2 games. I believe on Saturday they got 13-something along the lines of 13-4. So that would tell you right there that the Game 1 had somewhere in the 15s, maybe it peaked at 16. So that's a good number for baseball, but it's interesting because it's not as if the series is 1-1 where a lot of people will be watching. And it's going up against the NFL tonight, not a marquee matchup in the least, although you have marquee franchises in the sport, Giants and Steelers, but this is not a heavyweight bout or even a 3.5-star matchup where you're going to want to watch from kickoff to the final gun. My voice is shot here. I don't know why, and I don't know how, but I'm going to keep plowing through. But the baseball, let's see how it's going to do tonight. I think with the scene shifting to the Bronx, and for those who probably want to see the setting of Yankee Stadium, now it's not the old Yankee Stadium, as you know, but I think you should still get a good rating tonight, maybe somewhere in the teens. And if the game is competitive and certainly down to the wire, as we saw in Game 1, I'm sure you're going to get a higher rating. But if it's 3-0, everybody's going to jump ship. It's going to be a disaster for baseball. And that's why if it's 2-2, come Wednesday night, that rating should be not going to be NFL, of course, but it should probably draw 20 million, which would be a great number for baseball. So that's what we have there with the World Series, and you know I'll be all on top of that. Now, as I take off the batting gloves and the batting helmet and put on a different helmet with shoulder pads and go through the NFL and college football, yesterday, to me, these are the 3 themes. Of course, I'll go through the games. You had no buys yesterday. But I'll start off with Jayden Daniels and the miracle down in D.C. or outside of D.C. for the Commanders as the Washington football team, once upon a time known, beat the Bears on the final play, and you had the cornerback there, Tyreek Stevenson, taunting the fans there as the play was developing. And then he had to get into the play, and you saw it where it was deflected and then caught in the end zone. Unbelievable pandemonium down there in D.C. as the Commanders now 6-2 and have just been the biggest surprise in the NFL throughout the course of the first 8 weeks of the season. And for Daniels and what he's done here, and when I took a look at the second half of their season, still 9 games to go, but a schedule that has 4 games against Dallas and Philadelphia, which are going to be tricky games. And I understand the Cowboys right now, they're flailing, but still, it's not an automatic that they're going to go and sweep the Cowboys or the Eagles for that matter. They have the Saints on the schedule. They have the Falcons coming in later this year, and the Falcons have played well here as they beat Tampa yesterday, and I'll get into them a little bit later on. But with Tennessee still having to play, they got Pittsburgh coming into their building in a couple weeks. The Giants, this is a team that could make the playoffs. Now, we understand they're first in the division, so of course they can win the NFC East overall. But they've done such a good job here in the first part of the calendar of the season that they've putting themselves in good stead here for a second half that even if they play, let's say, a game over 500, so let's say if they're 5-4 over the last 9, that's 11 wins. They're going to make it to the postseason, whether it's winning the division or a wild card. So kudos to what they've done down there with Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels. His magical rookie season continues for all of his big throws and the great play. And even coming off of that rib injury, which was questionable on whether or not he was going to play in this game against the Bears. But kudos to Daniels and what they've done so far. Because granted, they're the Commanders. They're not the former Redskins. We know the tradition down there in D.C., the old RFK Stadium, Billy Kilmer, Sonny Jurgensen, the Hogs, Joe Theismann, Joe Gibbs. We can go on down the list. And granted that, although the tradition is rich there in the nation's capital, but a lot of that had to do more so with the 80s and into the 90s with the Joe Gibbs teams, with Mark Rippon and Doug Williams and winning those 3 Super Bowls. But we understand that Washington football is big, especially with the NFC East dating back to those days. So knowing that they're having a renaissance is great to see there in the NFL. So that's the good. The bad, I'll get into the Souths and maybe even the AFC East, which there's going to be a lead-in for that as far as the ugly goes. But the AFC East is pretty much wrapped up with the Bills winning in Seattle 31-10. And the Seahawks, you don't know from one week to the next. They lose to the Niners at home on a Thursday night where if they would have won, they would have put themselves in good position there in the NFC West. They lose that game. And then they go on the road to Atlanta. And Atlanta, who won yesterday at Tampa, as I mentioned, I'll get to them pretty much during this segment with the South. But for the Seahawks to now just all of a sudden revert back to how they performed there against the Niners just 2 weeks ago, and the Bills just go up there and pace them 31-10. So the Bills have pretty much wrapped up the division, and then they go back to the Souths, both in the AFC and NFC. The Texans beat the Colts there yesterday, where the Colts had an opportunity to at least draw even with them and also have the tiebreaker even because they did lose to them in week 1. But here's all you need to know about the Colts. There was a stretch in the third quarter where Anthony Richardson had a few runs, and a couple of them weren't by design. But for Richardson to have to call out of the game because he was tired and had Joe Flacco go in is all you need to know about the Colts, even Anthony Richardson to a certain extent. Richardson, we've seen him in and out of the lineup with these injuries, and then for him to say, oh, I'm tired, I need a break. This isn't the NBA where it's like I tap out, hey, give me a respite, and I'll come back there with 4 minutes to go in the game. Not the case. But the Texans, they win a game there, and they pretty much win the division because you're not going to hear from Tennessee and Jacksonville, and they have the tiebreaker advantage over the Colts. So you could say that the flag or the division is going to be owned by the AFC South there by the Houston Texans. And on the flip side, the NFC, you would have to look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had a good shot to win yesterday at home against Atlanta, who they lost to them a few Thursdays ago. But Atlanta, on a big performance by Kirk Cousins, where he threw for 279 yards, 4 touchdowns, they win 31-26. And for Baker Mayfield and company, who tried to come back, had a big game there, but threw a couple of interceptions. And for the Buccaneers, now they would have to look at a division where, although they're a game back, because the Falcons are 5-3 now, the Buccaneers are 4-4, but because they lose the tiebreaker to the Atlanta Falcons, if they end at a deadlock tie when it's all said and done after week 18, then they're either going to be a wild card team or chances are, they'll be a wild card team because they'll qualify for the NFC at that point. And for the Buccaneers, that was a tough loss there. A good chance to get back at the Falcons for what happened there, like I mentioned, down in Mercedes-Benz a few Thursdays ago. But a big performance there by the quarterback and Kirk Cousins. 5-3 for the Falcons as they now put themselves in a good position there in the NFC South. And I'm moving along here, the day overall was not a great one to go to the ugly if you're a fan and the team that is the New York Jets. I know I could spend a whole podcast just talking about them. And man, I can't believe my voice. I didn't wake up like this. I don't know what happened. It wasn't as if I was yelling and screaming watching a game. Maybe I'm becoming hoarse. Who knows? Not a horse, people. H-O-U-R. I don't even know how to spell it right now. H-O-A-R-S-E-E. Chop off one of those E's. Now it's getting to my brain, people. So now let me reel it in. Take a deep breath. Regroup. H-O-A-R-S-E. I won't edit that. I'll leave that for someone to chop that up and maybe even put it on a blooper reel. But for the Jets, what more can you say that hasn't been said? Woody Johnson is a joke. Joe Douglas is walking the plank. The interim coach, he is not long for this job and is in over his head in a one, Jeff Ulbrich. And now the quarterback has to wonder whether or not he wants to even come back here on this team, knowing that it's just been a flat-out disaster. And yesterday, if the rock bottom wasn't the week before, or the week before that, whether it was against the Jets, the Bills, even overseas in London against the Vikings, it certainly happened yesterday at the hands of who else but the New England Patriots. And for everything that happened there in the game yesterday, calling all their timeouts in the first quarter of the game, penalties, undisciplined left and right, for even Aaron Rodgers to come out and say we're in the darkness, for them to say that, yes, and I'm paraphrasing here, that we're not organized, we're in disarray, is the Jets in a nutshell here throughout the first eight games of the season. And now you really have to think, even with a schedule that's going to lighten up a little bit, but this team is going nowhere fast. Woody Johnson, who wanted to come in here a couple weeks ago and say, oh, we're going to have to do something, make changes. Robert Saleh, who in his own right was not a good fit and not a good coach here in New York. But for Ulbrich to come in here, who was a defensive coordinator, and the defense has regressed from the first 5 weeks of the season. And we know that they should just probably hire another coach or look for another coach now to at least maybe for the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season to have some kind of momentum going into next year. But to bring in Devontae Adams and even Hassan Reddick gets signed and he comes back and he was no help. And Adams, he might as well be, forget about it, the Adams family. Who is the main, you got Morticia, and that's how bad this team has been. And they're going to have to blow it up. And Woody Johnson, it all starts and ends with him. Remember, this is the same guy that became an ambassador to the UK and left the team to his brother from 2017 to 2021. And we know during that period, Chris Johnson did nothing with the organization. The team has not seen the playoffs since 2010 when they went to an AFC Championship game under Rex Ryan. And now here they are staring at oblivion here in New York with the Giants as well, looking at 2-6 tonight in Pittsburgh. And it's not about the Giants right now, but the Jets are a complete, utter mess to the point where they're unwatchable. Whatever games that they have left on the docket when it comes to primetime games, you might as well start flexing out of them now. I don't care if they turn this season around starting today. This team is unwatchable. That's all there is to it. There isn't any much more way that I could be upfront, blunt, without cursing. This team needs not only a redo, not only does it need a rehaul, it needs a complete, utter makeover. Knock the whole house down. Make sure whatever pipes, whatever walls, toilets, kitchen sinks, everything is out. And you're going to have to start over. And guess what? You're still going to have the same owner there, and he's going nowhere. So you can only hope, Jet fans, that whatever fixing that needs to be done to this organization, that it happens sooner than later. Now, as I go through some of these games, let me see, where should I start here? Yeah, do I need to talk about Denver beating Carolina? Absolutely not. I know Bryce Young played where Andy Dalton suffered a thumb injury in the car accident that thankfully he and his family are okay. But Bryce Young, who came in and tried to do what he can, 224 yards, 24-37, a couple of touchdowns with 2 interceptions. And with that defense that the Broncos have, it's going to be tough sledding for Carolina as they try to get their footing on a season that is already lost. So for Denver, as they try to make a play for a fringe playoff spot in the AFC, and as we all know, Carolina is put out the pasture. Tua Tagovailoa comes back, actually played pretty well. bunch of cheers, but they fall short as the Arizona Cardinals kick a late field goal to win. And for Tua, who did, what did he do? 28 for 38, had 234 yards passing and a touchdown, but it wasn't enough as the Dolphins, they're going to be long for 2025 before you know it, if they already are not there at 2-5 as we know. But for Arizona, who is 4-4 and trying to make themselves respectable in an NFC West, where think about it, they have the same record, all tied, Arizona with the Seahawks and the 49ers, who beat the Cowboys last night. And I know you could have some controversy there. There should have been interference called on that one play, which would have extended the drive. But as we know, that wasn't the case, as the Cowboys lose again and the Niners get back in the win column. Maybe clearing my throat will do some good, JAYREELZ, as I clear my throat, excuse me. But the Cardinals, in a three-way tie, has the right to second. But guess what? They actually have first place in the NFC West. So who would have thought that after 8 weeks, and for the Cardinals to hold a share of first place, but for them to be at the top with the Niners and Seahawks? I would have never thought that. So kudos to what they've done here so far. Good job there in the desert from Kyler Murray and company. I'm not going to get on the Ravens. I know I could get on them as much as I could, as much as I'd love to, but with Jameis Winston, now I can get on their defense because their defense has been bad. We know how great their offense is, but Jameis Winston, and I get it, this was a week for the Browns, that organization, to rally around what happened there last week with the scenarios surrounding their quarterback, Deshaun Watson, and the fan base booing and then cheering, and Jameis Winston with that speech that he had after the game, talking about the love that he has for players and for Deshaun in particular and how hard he works and blah, blah, blah. And for Winston, who, as we all know, has a big-time arm. He's a guy that could not only win games for you, but he could also lose games for you or win games for the other team. But all he did yesterday was go 27 for 41, 334 yards, and 3 touchdowns, if I read that right. And for Winston, a guy that was pretty much in quarterback purgatory. We all know, number 1 pick many years ago, flamed out and did not play up to the capabilities coming out of Florida State. And here he is on a Brown team that looked like he was just going to be a caddy for Deshaun Watson. He fills in and does an admirable job. Now, it did come down to the final play where it looked like it was in a backyard or schoolyard with Lamar Jackson. And as he tried to make a play and was incomplete and he threw his helmet off, where again, John Harbaugh has not learned his lesson. And I get it, time expired, and he was frustrated. They didn't win the game or didn't have an opportunity to win or to close out the game. And for Lamar, you have to be more composed, my guy. You just can't throw off your helmet in disgust or out of frustration. We saw that last year in the AFC Championship game after he threw that interception, and it was up to the coach to grab his player to say, hey, do not show that type of emotion. You want to throw your arms up, not to say that you're showing up your own player, or if you want to go to the sideline and throw your helmet on the sideline, whatever, fine, not in the field of play. That's why Harbaugh's an overrated coach. And I don't care if he won a Super Bowl back in 2012, and yes, did a very good job, but that was 12 years ago. And for Harbaugh, you would think he has the pulse of his team. And after that disaster there in that fourth quarter against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, you would think he'd know better. He does not. And that's why, and I don't care how many speeches or talks he's had with Jackson in the locker room, everything for the whole world to see on the field, he has to curtail that. And that is the job of the head coach, and he hasn't done that. But anyway, give it up to the Browns as they rallied around their quarterback. Jameis Winston had a big game as they win 29-24. Am I going to get into Chargers beating the Saints 26-8? I know you had the incident there where Justin Herbert got wrapped up, and there was a lot of dirty play in that game. And the Saints, even with Sean Payton not there, a lot of leftover from Bounty Gate. Now, that was, what, more than a dozen years ago. Or roughly 2000. No, in fact, that was 2009, if you want to go Bounty Gate with Brett Favre in the championship game. But they did win 26-8. I don't know if there's going to be any fines handed out by the league from what we saw there with some of the Saints players. But the Chargers go ahead and win that game easily, 26-8. What else do I have to unpack here? Good game in Jacksonville where the Packers, no surprise, they did beat Jacksonville, another team, as I mentioned, dead team walking. And you had a situation where Jordan Love, who in that fourth quarter, when it came down to it, was on the sideline, unable to play. And it was a situation where the Packers, although had a lead, they foiled that, gave that up with about 1:40 to go, where they tied the game with a touchdown. And with time expiring on the clock, Brandon McManus kicks a field goal. They win the game 30-27 to get out of Jacksonville with a big win to keep pace with the Lions as well as the Vikings in the NFC North. So that was a big win by the Pack there on the road with Jordan Love. They're just hoping, praying that the Packers would have get out alive there and keep pace with the aforementioned Vikings and Packers. Then you had the Eagles win a big game in Cincinnati, and I think the bloom is off the rose there for the Bengals, and I say it in this way. 3 years ago, they went to a Super Bowl. 2 years ago, they went to an AFC Championship game, and even though they lost their quarterback last year, but they were 9-8 and played relatively well, although on the outside looking in for the postseason. And now you have a scenario where Burrow's been healthy, and even though with 2 straight wins and you felt that the momentum was going to be on their side to maybe make a run, and then have the Eagles, who, I get it, the Eagles are no pushover, but they certainly pushed over the Bengals there in the second half of that game as they just blew the doors off of the Bengals. They went into the locker room, tied at 10, and then they just blew them away with a 27-7 deficit in the second half. Touchdown bombs to Devontae Smith, and it just ran the Bengal defense roughshod as the Bengals are going to have to now wonder whether or not they're going to be any threat there as far as the playoffs in the AFC. They currently could be, after tonight, 3 games behind the Steelers, and they're already a tiebreaker mess with the Ravens as they lost to them early this year. So who knows what you're going to see from Cincinnati from here on out as they lose 37-17. And for the Bengals going into the season, we know about the contracts of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and even Joe Burrow not playing a lot, losing to the Patriots there in week 1. Just an abomination there in Cincinnati, and you wonder if they're going to regroup and make any noise to see if they can come back to be a semblance of those teams that went deep into the postseason 2 and 3 years ago. Me, I don't think that's going to be the case, but that's what you have there. And then Detroit beats Tennessee 52-14. Do I even need to get into that game? As the Lions look like to be the creme de la creme in the NFC, just blowing by the Titans there at home yesterday afternoon. And then you had the Thursday night game where the Rams kept their hopes alive, 3-4 in the NFC West, as they beat the Vikings. Now, there was a controversial call, a non-call on the face mask at 28-20, which then led to a safety. But even then, they had no timeouts, and to go down the length of the field to score a touchdown and get a 2-point conversion would have been asking a lot for the Vikings. And they lose Kristen Darisaw, their left tackle, out for the year, which is a huge blow for the Vikings, as now they're coming back down to earth. So let's see how they perform here after 2 straight losses and losing a key component to their offensive line. And the Rams hanging around. Now they are exploring trades for Tre'Davious White, the corner, formerly of the Buffalo Bills. So let's see if that's going to happen here as we get closer to the trade deadline, which is a week from tomorrow. And funny enough, how the NFL, I have to throw this out, when it was brought to my attention that the NFL, and I mentioned this, I believe, on Thursday's podcast, knowing that the trade deadline was on November 5th. But even the NFL, they'll try to do whatever it takes to take shine away from the NBA on Christmas Day with their Christmas Day schedule. And now they're trying to take over Election Day, which is going to be next to impossible, as we all know. But here's Roger Goodell, instead of saying, let's put it on a Monday the 4th. No, Tuesday, November 5th, let's try to do whatever it takes to even outshine an election, which is going to be historic and bigger than what we've ever seen here in God knows how long. But no, we're bulletproof. We're the shield. We're the NFL. We're going to do whatever it takes to try to put the spotlight on us as opposed to the election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. So I just had to throw that in there. And tonight, Giants-Steelers. I'm going to watch the World Series. I'm going to be back and forth with this game. You would think the Steelers are going to try to do what it takes just to run the ball down the Giants defense's throat. And Daniel Jones, is he going to have a shot against the Steeler defense? All right, it's not the Steel Curtain or Blitzburg or the teams that won titles there in the 2000s, but you would think that the Steelers should go away, watch this end up being a close game. But I would think Pittsburgh will boost their record to 6-2 when it's all said and done and keep themselves a game ahead of the Ravens in the AFC North. Now let me turn my attention to college football. College had a big game there Saturday night with Texas A&M and LSU. And for A&M, who were in a quandary where they had to do something. The game was in their building. They were down 17-7. And for whatever the reason, I don't know what the head coach was thinking by going in there and saying, you know what, I need to make a quarterback change. So what did Mike Elko do? He pulled Connor Weigman, and granted that they were awful in that first half, and he puts in Marcel Reed. And also Marcel Reed did was run for 3 touchdowns, gave a spark to that offense, and only threw 2 passes in the second half, albeit for 70 yards, but it was his legs that did all the talking as the Aggies came back from that deficit, and they won 38-23. And for the Aggies, a huge win because that's going to propel them, you would think, into the top 12. Tomorrow night, you'll have the first official college football playoff rankings to see where these teams stack up as we approach the month of November. And for LSU, that was a huge loss, which is going to lead into this week because you're going to have the game of all games, a loser leaves town match, which I'll talk more about on Thursday's podcast, between LSU and Alabama, who roasted Missouri. So now I don't want to hear about anything from Missouri as they beat them 34-0 in Tuscaloosa. But for the Aggies to outscore LSU 31-6 in the second half and not even do it through the air is an indictment on the LSU defense, number one, but also the coach looks like a shining star. Now, I don't know if that means moving forward they're going to put Reed in to start. You would think that Weigman is going to get his job back because he had to do something there as they were literally stuck in mud. But kudos to his decision and what Elko did to bring in Reed and made him look like a genius in the process. So let's see how that's going to bolster the Aggies, who, think about this, they are the only undefeated team in the Southeastern Conference. That's right. Georgia has a loss. Alabama, as we know, has a loss. Tennessee, obviously LSU. Only Texas A&M is undefeated in the conference. But does that mean that you're going to see a matchup there in the SEC Championship going up against the likes of Georgia to see whether or not they're going to stack well against them? Obviously, we still have plenty of time between now and then. But still, even Texas, there's another team I got to throw in there that has a loss in the SEC. And speaking of Texas, they beat Vandy. They were in control of the game pretty much. They won 27-24. I know the score looks a lot closer than the final indicated, but for Quinn Ewers to throw for 3 touchdowns, he also threw for a couple of picks. But Texas gets the win there. And then Ohio State, that was another game that made you sweat there a little bit as they survived at home where they were down 17-14 to Nebraska, and they turned it around there after Nebraska took the lead there early in the fourth quarter. They answered with a touchdown drive of their own, which was huge, because I wonder if they went 3 and out or maybe turned the ball over there, who knows how Ohio State would have played. They would have been tight, and that would have been just a debilitating loss. Now, granted, not in the big picture grand scheme of things, because we would think that they're going to make it into the college football playoff, even with the loss at Oregon, as we know, but they survived, and they got a late pick to seal the game as they win 21-17 to Nebraska in their building. So they were able to get out alive and put themselves in decent position here, because as I go through the rankings, as of right now, of course, tomorrow night, you'll get the first unveiling of the playoff rankings as it is, but it's Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, and Miami now jumps to 5 over Texas. I guess the Vandy game, maybe they had to take a step back based on what they saw, and Miami did beat Florida State. They pasted them down in South Florida. Then you have Texas 6, Tennessee, Notre Dame, who just waxed Navy there at MetLife on Saturday, BYU, then Texas A&M rounds out your top 10, followed by Iowa State, Clemson are tied, and then Indiana with Alabama, Boise State, LSU. LSU, I believe, 16th right now. So Thursday, we'll talk a little bit more about the playoff rankings and where these teams stack as we get to November. Think about it, people. November 1st is Friday, so Saturday you'll have the new month and a big month for college football to see where these teams will end up as we get set for our first ever expanded college football playoff with 12 teams. All right, now let me put on my high tops, go through the association real quick. Just about 1 week into the season, and here are a couple of things to keep an eye for. Lakers, 3-0 to start their year. And yes, talk of Bronny going back from the G League and back to the team. To me, that's small potatoes, but I had to throw that out there. But 3-0 for the Lakers, great start. All at home, I might add, beating Minnesota, Phoenix, and Sacramento. Let's see what they do on the road. LeBron, being LeBron, and AD with 3 30-point games to start the year. I believe only Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, and Kobe Bryant has done that in the history of the Lakers. So something to keep in mind there as far as them getting off to a great start. As we know, they've gotten off to very slow starts over the last couple of years, including 2-10, if you remember, 2 years ago. And they went to a conference final that year, if you recall. But you had the Lakers getting off to a great start. Kevin Durant eclipses 29,000 points, the 8th player in NBA history to reach that milestone. And you could definitely spare me with the too small to Luka. I understand he scored over him, but you don't want to pick on Luka. And I get it. KD's an all-time great and one of the greatest scorers the NBA's ever seen. But to call Luka small, I'm sure maybe Luka will keep that in the back of his mental Rolodex because you know that he has that Larry Bird FU mentality, and I'm sure there may be some payback down the road. We shall see, but just keep that in the back of your mental Rolodex. But for Kevin Durant, he's going to eclipse 30,000 before the year is out if he stays healthy. So he'll be in the likes of Dirk Nowitzki, Kareem, LeBron, of course, Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant. I may be missing a player or two along the way. Let me see. 8 players all time. LeBron, Kareem, Karl Malone, Kobe. Shaq didn't get to 30. Nowitzki's over 30. And Durant will be up there. I know I'm missing a couple others, but you have that scenario regarding Kevin Durant. And then Steph Curry turned his ankle not once but twice in the game there yesterday. And we understand he has those tender ankles. Who knows how long he's going to be out, but that's going to be a big blow for Golden State if he's not going to be in the lineup. So let's see. I'm sure it's going to be day to day. Nothing, I'm sure, that's too severe. If it's a high ankle sprain, you know those suckers never heal. So that's one thing that we're going to have to pay attention to, especially if the Warriors are going to try to make any hay out in the Western Conference. And overall, your undefeated team, Celtics, who won 2 games in Detroit and Washington, no big whip there. But for them, Cleveland off to a great start. They play the Knicks tonight at Madison Square Garden, so that's an interesting matchup here early on. Break it up for the Nets. They beat the Bucks there yesterday, so for Jordy Fernandez gets his first ever win. So you like to see that if you're a Net fan. And other teams that are 3-0, no surprise that the Oklahoma City Thunder, as well as the Lakers, those are the 4 teams that are undefeated. Boston, Cleveland, OKC, and the Lakers. And teams that have not won yet, the aforementioned Wizards and Pistons, as well as Utah, Sacramento, a little bit of a surprise, and the Denver Nuggets. Denver Nuggets are 0-2, and they come to Brooklyn tomorrow, so I'll get a bird's eye view of how they'll perform here right in front of my eyes. Of course, I'll be focused in on the World Series, but I'll keep an eye on what Denver does here as they try to get their first victory of the year. Besides that, nothing else to really chew on. It's only the first week of the NBA season. Now as I lace up my skates to go through the NHL, Winnipeg riding high, flying high, 8-0, the only undefeated team in the National Hockey League. They're doing as well as you possibly can. And remember, Winnipeg had that very big second half of the year before they fizzled out in the first round of the playoffs badly against Colorado. But for guys like Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, who's been a longtime member of the team, and another Connor Hellebuck, who had an abysmal postseason, but now is looking like the Vezina Trophy form that he's had in years past. He is 6-0 with a 1.6 goals against average. So for Winnipeg, trying to pick up from where they left off in the regular season, but as we all know, it's all about what happens there in April, May, and June. So let's see if they can keep it up, and where do you see them losing along the way? Let me pull up their schedule. I know they have Colorado upcoming, and they play the Rangers. That's in the middle of November, so that's still a ways to go there. But as far as Winnipeg, I know they have Toronto, I believe, tonight. So that could be a game or tomorrow. Let me take a look at that quickly. Toronto, I know, is their next game. And that is tonight. So let's see if the firepower of the Maple Leafs could go in there and beat the Jets to snap that good start of 8-0. And for the rest of the schedule here, at least for the week, they go to Detroit on Wednesday, at Columbus Friday. Now, they do play Tampa on Sunday, so who knows? Maybe they could go to Sunday with an 11-0 record. We'll keep an eye on that. Keep you posted. Yes, they don't play the Rangers. In fact, they have a stretch where Sunday against Tampa at home, then Utah, Colorado, Dallas, and then at New York, at Tampa, at Florida. So you know that the streak's going to end. Will it end over the course of these next few days? Who knows? I think Toronto can beat them. If they do beat Toronto, I think they'll beat Detroit, although it's on the road. But we'll see. I'll continue to monitor that. San Jose, another rough start to their season, and the only team that hasn't won. 0-7-2. Last year, I believe they were 0-10 to start their year. So they're certainly piggybacking from the way they started their season last year to this year. And besides that, I know he had a big signing there. Alexis Lafreniere, 7-year deal from the Rangers, and he's off to a tremendous start. Finally paying dividends for a guy that was much ballyhooed coming out of junior. Number 1 overall pick where the Rangers got lucky in the lottery. And for Lafreniere, who did not have a first 2 years were not good. Third year was better, and the postseason was even better than that. And now it looks like he's ready to take off on his career, to have a big-time career. And kudos to him, although I am not a Rangers fan, I can't stand them. But you know what? Now gets extended, and it looks like he's going to be maybe even a future captain of this team, depending on how he performs here throughout the course of this contract, which we would think it's going to be very high. What else do I have? NHL. Yeah, besides that, nothing much else to even unwrap or discuss. Let's see what we got there with the standings. As I'm just trying to battle through here and plug away with this voice and this throat of mine. Panthers have played well. They beat the Rangers there, and also the Islanders over the weekend. Islanders had a 3-0 lead against the Panthers on Saturday night, and then that went up in smoke as the Panthers scored 6 unanswered, 3 in the second and 3 in the third to beat the Islanders. But they did beat the Rangers there, and a rematch of the Eastern Conference Finals there on Thursday. But other than that, yeah, that's all you have there really to discuss. I know Colorado's played well after their sluggish start. They were 0-4, now have won 5 straight. What else? Nashville, remember they were 0-5, and I was bitching and moaning about them because I picked them as an over this year. Well, they won 3 straight, so hopefully they got their season on track. And Carolina bouncing back. A lot of teams that have put together some streaks here. Sabres have won 3 in a row. But again, very early, and I'll continue to keep my fingers on the pulse when it comes to that. And then lastly, I know you had an MMA bout, UFC, on Saturday night, which I did not watch. But you had Max Holloway, who's been good of late. I remember talking about a Holloway fight, a few months ago, where he performed very well. In fact, off the top of my head, was that against, as I rack my brain here, the name will lose me right now, but I know Holloway did very well, but here it was going up against Ilia Topuria, and what happened? He got knocked out in the 3rd round, the first time Holloway's ever been knocked out in an MMA fight. 1 minute and 34 seconds into the 3rd round, he was cooked. And for Topuria, who knows if there's going to be a rematch or anything else along the lines. Although Topuria, looking at his record, he is undefeated. So who knows? This could be a guy that's heading up the ranks there for the class that he's in. I couldn't even tell you right now. But I know that was a big fight. I know I didn't watch. I know people can say, JAYREELZ, come on. What the hell's going on? You should be on top of this. Well, at least I was on top of it to discuss. I'm sure Holloway's going to come back hungrier and see whether or not he could get himself back in the mix there, whether it's with Topuria or anybody else. But Holloway, first time he's ever been knocked out. So I'm sure that was a sight that UFC fans have not seen and maybe we're even surprised to see. So that's what you have there with the UFC. And that's what you have with the podcast, people. Thank you for listening. Thank you for hearing me just trying to fight, scratch, claw my way through this podcast. And I got news for you. I woke up this morning and I was feeling fine. Had discussions with my wife. Everything was good. The minute I get on the microphone, boom. I hope I'm not going to get a bout of laryngitis because I certainly don't want to miss come Thursday, but I'll do my best to take care of this ailing throat and voice of mine to make sure that it's as crystal clear and not as if I just swallowed a ton of gravel. But thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, of course the website, JAYREELZ.com. YouTube, go to the channel, subscribe there, people. I implore you to do so. If you can, please go there as I put daily shorts as well as this podcast. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, and suggestion, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, JAYREELZ1, just the number, on Twitter or X, and the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA. Full-time content creator, podcast, producer, host, etc. Coming at you twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. Doing what I love, people. So please, I need the support. I will just be over the moon and beyond happy and grateful for your contribution, for your participation in helping out this content creator, because you know I will do nothing short of delivering nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.